In a sun-drenched Hawaiian beachfront estate, a 62-year-old real estate agent was about to execute the most satisfying act of justice in her 30-year career. What began as a routine luxury home listing transformed into a stunning display of power when she turned the tables on a family that had publicly humiliated her. Eleanor "Ellie" Kapua wasn't your typical real estate agent. For 3 decades, she had built her reputation selling properties to local families, known for her uncompromising integrity in a market increasingly dominated by mainland investors. When wealthy clients told her she didn't belong in their exclusive world, she made a decision that would shake the foundations of Maui's luxury real estate market. The community would never be the same. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The ocean breeze carried the scent of plumeria through the open windows as Eleanor Kapua carefully arranged the fresh-cut flowers on the marble countertop. The $8.5 million beachfront property in Wailea gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, its floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Pacific's turquoise waters. She stepped back to assess her work, her experienced eye noting how the tropical arrangement complemented the home's sophisticated interior. At 62, Eleanor, Ellie to those who knew her well, had spent 3 decades navigating Hawaii's complex real estate landscape. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her linen dress professional yet comfortable. In the island heat, the golden pendant around her neck, a small turtle carved from Hawaiian koa wood, had been her grandmother's, a reminder of her deep roots on the island. The Richardson estate was her most prestigious listing of the year, a property that could set a new sales record for the area. The commission would help fund her daughter's medical school tuition at UCLA and perhaps finally allow Ellie to take that trip to Japan she'd been postponing for years. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Marcus Richardson, the property owner who had reluctantly listed his vacation home after his investment firm suffered significant losses. "Eleanor, have you prepared everything for tomorrow's showing?" His voice carried the crisp, authoritative tone of someone accustomed to giving orders rather than making requests. "Yes, Mr. Richardson. The property is staged perfectly. I've arranged for fresh flowers, adjusted the lighting to maximize the ocean view, and prepared detailed information packages for the interested buyers." Ellie moved through the space as she spoke, double-checking that everything was immaculate. "The Changs are serious contenders. They're flying in from Singapore specifically to see the property. This needs to go flawlessly." "I understand completely. I've been preparing all week." Ellie's tone remained professional, masking her irritation at the implication that she might not know how to handle high-value clients after 30 years in the business. "Good. And Eleanor?" He paused, and she could picture him adjusting his designer glasses, a habit he displayed whenever he was about to say something condescending. "Remember that these clients expect a certain atmosphere. Perhaps have one of your younger associates present as well? Someone who fits the luxury market image." The suggestion stung, but Ellie had grown accustomed to the subtle digs about her age, her local background, her less-than-glamorous appearance. "Mr. Richardson, I've successfully closed 12 luxury property sales in the past 18 months. Including the Anderson estate which sold for $10 million. I believe I can manage this showing." Of course. Just a suggestion." His dismissive tone said otherwise. "I'll see you tomorrow at 11. After hanging up, Ellie allowed herself a moment of frustration, gripping the edge of the imported marble countertop. 30 years building her reputation, establishing connections across the islands, understanding the market better than anyone else on Maui, and still, clients like Richardson questioned her ability to represent high-end properties because she didn't fit their image of what luxury should look like. The drive home took her along the coastline, past stretches of beach that had once been accessible to local families but were now largely hidden behind the walls of exclusive resorts and private estates. Her modest condo in Kihei was comfortable, but simple, nothing like the properties she sold. From her lanai, she could still see a sliver of ocean between 2 recently constructed vacation rentals. Her daughter's call came just as she was settling down with a cup of tea. "Hi, Mom. How was your day?" Leilani's voice carried the enthusiasm of youth, though at 26 and in her second year of medical school, she was hardly a child anymore. "Just finished staging the Richardson property. Big showing tomorrow with buyers from Singapore." "The $8 million beach house? That's amazing, Mom. Your biggest sale yet, right?" "If it goes through. Richardson is already suggesting I might not be the right fit for clients at this level." Leilani's irritation was immediate and fierce. "That's ridiculous. You've been selling properties on Maui since before he bought his first luxury watch. What exactly does he think you're missing?" Ellie sighed, sinking deeper into her worn rattan chair. Oh, you know. I'm not young enough, glamorous enough, mainland enough. The usual. Mom, you're the best real estate agent on the island. Everyone knows that. Your clients love you because you're honest and you know every inch of Maui better than anyone. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Not everyone values those qualities, sweetheart. Sometimes people want flash over substance. They talked for a while longer about Leilani's classes, her upcoming exams, her plans to return home for a brief visit during the summer break. The conversation left Ellie feeling both proud and wistful, proud of her daughter's accomplishments, wistful about the sacrifices they'd both made to get there. After they hung up, Ellie found herself looking through old photographs stored in a wooden box on her bookshelf. Images of her late husband, Daniel, who had died 12 years ago after a brief battle with pancreatic cancer. Pictures of Leilani growing up, learning to surf, graduating high school as valedictorian, receiving her acceptance letter to UCLA. And photos of the island from decades past, before the massive development boom had transformed the coastline. One image caught her eye, herself at 30, standing proudly in front of her first real estate office, Kapua Properties. She had opened it with a loan co-signed by her father, determined to build something of her own after years working for mainland-owned agencies. The business had thrived for nearly 2 decades before the 2008 recession forced her to close and join a larger firm. The young woman in the photo had been full of determination, unaware of how the industry would change, how increasingly she would feel like an outsider in her own homeland. Hawaiian-born but not fitting the image that wealthy investors wanted, someone younger, someone who reminded them of themselves. The next morning, Ellie dressed with particular care, selecting a tasteful blue dress and the pearl earrings Daniel had given her on their 10th anniversary. She arrived at the Richardson property an hour early to ensure everything was perfect, adjusting flower arrangements, opening blinds to maximize the view, setting the smart home system to play soft instrumental music. At precisely 10:45, Marcus Richardson arrived, wearing a linen suit that probably cost more than Ellie's monthly mortgage payment. His wife Victoria followed, her blonde hair perfectly styled, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. Eleanor, he nodded curtly. Is everything ready? Completely ready, Mr. Richardson. The property looks spectacular today. The lighting is perfect for showcasing the ocean views. Victoria glanced around with a critical eye. You've changed the staging in the living room. Yes, I brought in some local artisan pieces to complement the architecture. Research shows that buyers at this level are increasingly interested in authentic local elements, not just generic luxury. Victoria raised an eyebrow but said nothing, turning instead to adjust a cushion that didn't need adjusting. At 11 sharp, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. The Changs, Lawrence and Malin, emerged, both dressed impeccably and understated. Designer clothing that spoke of old money and refined taste. Their daughter, perhaps in her 30s, followed closely behind. Welcome to one of Wailea's most exceptional beachfront estates, Ellie greeted them warmly, extending her hand. I'm Eleanor Kapua, and I'll be showing you the property today. Lawrence Chong shook her hand firmly. Thank you for accommodating our schedule. We're only on the island for 2 days. It's my pleasure. I understand your time is valuable. Marcus stepped forward, almost edging Ellie aside. Marcus Richardson. This has been our family's vacation home for the past 8 years. We've spared no expense in its upkeep and enhancement. The subtle dismissal was clear, but Ellie maintained her professional demeanor as she began the tour, highlighting the property's unique features: the custom-built kitchen with imported Italian marble, the primary suite with its panoramic ocean views, the infinity pool that seemed to merge with the horizon. Her knowledge of the property was comprehensive, her presentation polished from years of experience. The Changs asked thoughtful questions about the neighborhood, the construction, potential renovation possibilities, all of which Ellie answered with authority. As they moved through the house, however, she noticed Marcus and Victoria exchanging glances whenever she spoke, subtle looks of doubt or dismissal. When they reached the media room, Marcus interrupted her explanation of the custom sound system. What Eleanor may not be mentioning is that this system was designed by the same acoustics team that worked on the Sydney Opera House renovations. It's quite beyond the standard setups you'd typically find. The implication that she wouldn't know or think to mention this detail was clear, though it had been in her presentation notes for the next room. Actually, Ellie said smoothly, I was saving that information for when we discussed the entertainment features as a whole. The integration between the indoor and outdoor sound systems is particularly impressive, allowing for seamless audio whether you're in the media room or entertaining on the lanai. Lawrence Chong nodded appreciatively, but Marcus had already moved on, drawing attention to another feature before she could continue. This pattern repeated throughout the tour, Ellie providing expert information only to have Marcus interject, correct, or imply her knowledge was incomplete. By the time they reached the outdoor living area, the final stop on the tour, tension hung in the air like the humid promise of a tropical storm. As they stood on the expansive lanai overlooking the Pacific, mainland, Chang turned to Ellie. Miss Kapua, you mentioned earlier that you've lived on Maui your entire life. That must give you a unique perspective on how the island has changed. Before Ellie could respond, Victoria Richardson let out a light laugh. Oh, Eleanor has seen quite a lot of change, haven't you? She's practically an institution in local real estate. The word institution hung in the air, deliberately emphasizing Ellie's age and implying she was perhaps a relic of an earlier era. I prefer to think of it as having historical context, Ellie replied evenly. When you've watched a place evolve over decades, you develop insights that can't be gained any other way. For instance, this property sits on land that once belonged to one of Maui's most respected families. The care they took with the land, their understanding of the wind and water patterns, actually influenced the current home's design in ways that modern architects might have missed. Lawrence Chung seemed genuinely interested. That's fascinating. Are there other properties in this area with similar historical significance? Several, actually. I'd be happy to provide you with information about. I think what the Changs are really interested in, Marcus interrupted, is the current value proposition and future appreciation potential, not local folklore. The dismissal was so blatant that even the Changs looked uncomfortable. Their daughter, who had been quietly observing throughout the tour, gave Ellie a sympathetic glance. Actually, Lawrence said firmly, we're interested in both the investment aspects and the cultural context. When purchasing a property of this significance, understanding its place in the community matters to us. Ellie felt a small surge of vindication, but it was short-lived. As the tour concluded and they returned to the foyer, Marcus suggested that the Changs might want to take some time to discuss privately. Victoria and I will step outside. Eleanor can answer any technical questions about the property while you consider. Once the Richardsons had stepped onto the front porch, Mainland turned to Ellie. Miss Kapua, you've been wonderfully informative. We'd like to know more about the neighboring properties as well. Are there any issues with beach access or community relations we should be aware of? This was precisely the kind of question where Ellie's local knowledge proved invaluable. She explained the complex history of beach access rights in Hawaii, the growing tensions between vacation homeowners and local residents, and the community initiatives that were working to bridge those divides. If you purchase this home, she concluded, you're not just buying a property, you're becoming part of a community with deep historical roots and ongoing challenges. The buyers who have the most positive experiences are those who respect and engage with that reality. Lawrence nodded thoughtfully. That's precisely the kind of insight we were hoping for. In Singapore, we understand the importance of respecting local contexts. Their conversation continued for another 15 minutes, growing increasingly comfortable as Ellie shared her deep knowledge of the area. When Marcus and Victoria returned, looking expectantly at the potential buyers, Lawrence Chang smiled politely. We'd like to see the property once more, if you don't mind. Perhaps just with Ms. Kapua this time, to ask some specific questions about the land and neighborhood. The flicker of displeasure on Marcus's face was quickly masked, but Ellie caught it clearly, as did the Changs, she suspected. Of course, Marcus said smoothly. Eleanor knows the technical details. We'll wait in the kitchen. As Ellie led the family through a second, more relaxed tour, she felt a growing connection with these potential buyers who, unlike the Richardsons, seemed to value her knowledge and perspective. When they finally returned to the foyer, Lawrence Chang extended his hand. Thank you, Ms. Kapua. You've given us much to consider. We'll be in touch very soon. After the Changs departed, Marcus turned to Ellie, his expression tight. What exactly did they want to see again? They had questions about the property's relationship to the surrounding community and some specifics about construction materials that might affect maintenance in the tropical environment. Victoria sighed dramatically. I hope you didn't go on about all that native history again. These people are sophisticated investors, not cultural tourists. Actually, Ellie said calmly, Mr. Chung specifically asked about the historical and cultural context. As someone investing millions in a property, he wants to understand its complete situation. Marcus checked his watch impatiently. Well, what's your assessment? Are they serious? They're very serious. But they're also thoughtful buyers who won't be rushed. I believe they'll make an offer, but they'll want to feel confident they understand exactly what they're purchasing, including its place in the community. Victoria rolled her eyes slightly. All that matters is the beachfront location and the quality of construction. The community context won't affect the property value. Ellie had heard variations of this sentiment countless times over the years, but coming at the end of a showing where she'd been repeatedly undermined, it sparked something stronger than her usual professional restraint. Actually, Mrs. Richardson, community relations increasingly affect property values on Maui. Homes perceived as respectful to local culture and accessible to the community tend to appreciate more steadily than those that create tension. It's something I've observed consistently over 30 years in this market. Marcus's expression hardened. I think we understand the market quite well, Eleanor. After all, we've owned luxury properties across 4 countries. Of course. I'm simply sharing the local perspective that the Changs seemed interested in. Victoria gathered her designer handbag, clearly ready to end the conversation. Well, let's hope they make an offer quickly. Marcus has that investment opportunity in Singapore to consider. As they prepared to leave, Marcus turned back to Ellie. Oh, and for the next showing, I think we should have Jason from your office join you. His background in international luxury markets might be helpful for communicating with buyers at this level. Jason was 35, white, Harvard-educated, and had moved to Maui just 3 years ago. His international luxury experience consisted mainly of a brief stint selling condos in Miami. I don't believe that will be necessary, Ellie replied, her voice cooling several degrees. The Changs seemed quite satisfied with my presentation. It's not a suggestion, Eleanor. Marcus's tone made it clear he considered the matter settled. This is an $8 million property. We need to project the right image. The right image. The words hung in the air between them, their meaning unmistakable. And what image would that be, Mr. Richardson? Ellie asked, though she already knew the answer. Victoria sighed as if Ellie was being deliberately obtuse. You know perfectly well what Marcus means. This level of property requires a certain presentation. Someone who reflects the lifestyle these buyers aspire to. Someone younger? Someone white? Someone more mainland? Ellie's direct questions surprised even herself. Marcus's expression tightened. Don't make this about something it's not. We're simply saying that perhaps you're not the best fit for this particular property. You do very well with the mid-range local market, but this, he gestured around. The expansive foyer with its soaring ceiling and ocean view, this requires a different approach. After 30 years selling real estate on Maui, including 12 luxury properties in the past 18 months alone, you believe I'm not qualified to represent your home? It's not about qualification, Victoria interjected, her voice carrying the practiced patience of someone explaining something simple to a child. It's about presentation, about creating an aspirational experience for buyers. And I don't create that experience? Marcus checked his watch again, clearly uncomfortable with the direct confrontation. Eleanor, let's be practical. You're an excellent agent with deep local knowledge. But buyers at this level respond to people who reflect the lifestyle they're purchasing. Jason presents that image more effectively. The truth of what they were saying, what they had been implying throughout the showing, finally crystallized. After decades of work, after building her reputation through market crashes and recoveries, after helping hundreds of families find homes they loved, she was being told that her appearance, her age, her very identity as a local Hawaiian woman, made her unsuitable to represent luxury properties. I see, Ellie said, her voice calm despite the anger building inside her. You believe I don't belong in the luxury market because of who I am, not because of my capabilities. Now you're being dramatic, Victoria said dismissively. We're simply making a business decision about how to best market our property. Ellie straightened her shoulders, making a decision that would alter the course of not just this sale, but her entire career. Mr. and Mrs. Richardson, I've spent my entire professional life helping people find homes they love on this island. I've guided buyers through complex purchases, helped sellers maximize their returns, and always maintained the highest ethical standards. Marcus glanced at his watch again. Yes, and we appreciate that, but I'm not finished, Ellie continued, her voice gaining strength. You've made it clear that you believe I don't belong in the world of luxury real estate because I don't fit your image of what that should look like. You've dismissed my knowledge, undermined my presentation, and now explicitly stated that my appearance makes me unsuitable to represent your property. Victoria's expression hardened. We never said anything about your appearance. You didn't have to. Your meaning was perfectly clear. Ellie took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside her, a lifetime of accommodating others' expectations giving way to something fiercer and more authentic. I will not be bringing Jason or anyone else to future showings. In fact, there won't be any future showings, because as of this moment, I am terminating our listing agreement. Marcus's face flushed with anger. You can't do that. We have a contract. Check section 14. 3. Ellie replied calmly. The contract allows for termination if there is a fundamental breakdown in the client-agent relationship that cannot be reasonably resolved. I believe we've reached that point. This is ridiculous, Victoria sputtered. You're throwing away your commission because your feelings are hurt? I'm choosing to work with clients who value my expertise and respect me as a professional. The Changs, for instance, seem to appreciate exactly what I bring to the table. The Changs won't work with you without our property, Marcus said coldly. And once I explain to your broker why we're pulling our listing, you may find your position at the firm becomes precarious. The threat was clear, but something had broken open in Ellie, a lifetime of careful accommodation giving way to a fierce determination. Mr. Richardson, there are other properties and other clients. What there isn't is another Eleanor Kapua with 30 years of experience and unmatched local knowledge. She gathered her presentation materials with deliberate calm. I'll have the termination paperwork delivered to your attorney this afternoon. You'll need to find another agent to represent your property. As she walked toward the door, Victoria called after her, You're making a serious mistake, Eleanor. No one turns down a listing like this over hurt feelings. Ellie paused at the threshold, turning back to face them one last time. This isn't about hurt feelings. It's about dignity and self-respect. Something I value more than any commission. With that, she walked out into the bright Hawaiian sunshine, closing the door firmly behind her. In her car, parked in the circular driveway with its view of palm trees and ocean beyond, Ellie sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding with the enormity of what she had just done. $8 million. A commission that would have secured Leilani's medical school tuition, that would have allowed Ellie to finally take that trip to Japan, that might have been the crowning achievement of her career. All walked away from. Because she refused to be told she didn't belong. As the reality of her decision settled over her, Ellie's phone rang. It was Lawrence Chong. Miss Kapua, he said when she answered. I hope I'm not calling too soon after our meeting. My family and I have been discussing the property, and we have some additional questions we hoped you might answer. Ellie took a deep breath. Mr. Chong, I should inform you that I am no longer representing the Richardson property. There was a disagreement about the marketing approach. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I see, Lawrence finally said. That's unfortunate. My family and I were very impressed with your knowledge and professionalism. Thank you. I appreciate that. In fact, he continued, we were hoping to work with you specifically, regardless of whether we decide on the Richardson property. We're considering several options on Maui, and your expertise would be invaluable. Ellie felt a surge of vindication. I would be happy to help you explore other properties that might meet your needs. Excellent. Perhaps we could meet tomorrow to discuss our requirements in more detail? As Ellie confirmed the appointment and hung up, she realized that what had felt like an ending might actually be a beginning. The Richardsons had told her she didn't belong in their world of luxury real estate, but perhaps it was time to redefine what that world looked like, to create a space where her knowledge, her experience, and yes, her identity as a local Hawaiian woman were seen as assets rather than liabilities. With renewed determination, she started her car and drove away from the Richardson estate, already formulating a plan that would not just salvage her career but transform it into something more authentic and powerful than she had ever imagined. The community would indeed never be the same, and neither would she. The drive back to her office felt surreal. Ellie's hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as the gravity of her decision sank in. She had just walked away from the biggest commission of her career, a sum that would have covered her daughter's remaining medical school tuition with enough left over for that long-postponed trip to Japan. All because she refused to be told. She didn't belong. The familiar streets of Wailea gave way to the more modest surroundings of Kihei as she approached the regional office of Island Paradise Realty. The company's sleek logo adorned the front of the single-story building, a far cry from the small, independent office she had proudly owned before the 2008 recession forced her to join a larger firm. You did what? Diane Nakamura, the office manager and Ellie's friend of 20 years, stared at her in disbelief when Ellie explained what had happened. They sat in the small break room, ceramic mugs of coffee cooling between them. You terminated the listing agreement with the Richardsons? For an $8 million property? They made it clear they didn't think I was the right image for their listing, Ellie replied, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. They wanted Jason to take over showings because he better represents the luxury lifestyle. Diane winced. That's terrible, but Ellie. Jason is 35 with 3 years of experience. You've been selling real estate since he was in elementary school. Apparently that's the problem. I'm too old, too local, too everything they're not. Robert is going to have a coronary when he hears about this, Diane said, referring To their broker, a mainland transplant who had taken over the firm 5 years ago and had been steadily pushing it toward the luxury market. Probably, Ellie agreed, taking a sip of her now lukewarm coffee. But there's something else. Lawrence Chong called me right after I left the Richardsons. They want to work with me specifically, regardless of whether they buy that property. Diane's eyebrows shot up. The Singapore buyers? The ones who were looking at the Richardson place? Yes. They appreciated my knowledge of the island and the market. They're considering several properties and want my guidance. A slow smile spread across Diane's face. Now that's a twist the Richardsons won't see coming. Before Ellie could respond, the break room door swung open. Robert Keller stood in the doorway, his perpetually tanned face set in lines of barely contained fury. Eleanor, my office. Now. He turned and stalked away without waiting for a response. Diane gave Ellie's hand a quick squeeze. Stand your ground. You did nothing wrong. Robert's office was a testament to his mainland sensibilities: sleek, modern furniture, abstract art, and a large window offering views of the parking lot rather than the ocean that was just a block away. He stood behind his desk, a printout clutched in his hand. Do you want to explain why I just received this email from Marcus Richardson? He slapped the paper down on the desk. He says you abruptly terminated your listing agreement and walked out in the middle of a showing with qualified buyers. Ellie met his gaze steadily. That's not accurate. The showing had concluded successfully. The Richardsons then informed me that they wanted Jason to handle future showings because they felt I didn't project the right image for luxury real estate. And instead of discussing this with me, you unilaterally terminated a multi-million-dollar listing? I terminated a relationship with clients who explicitly stated they didn't want to work with me because of who I am, not because of my qualifications or performance. Robert ran a hand through his silver hair, his frustration evident. Eleanor, this business is about making sales, not taking personal stands. If the clients requested Jason, they didn't request him because of his expertise, Ellie interrupted, her voice firm. They requested him because he's young, white, and mainland. They made that abundantly clear. That's not what they're saying. According to this email, they had concerns about your approach to marketing luxury properties. They certainly did. Their concern was that my approach included too much knowledge about local history, culture, and community context, all of which the actual buyers, the Changs, found valuable and interesting. Robert sighed heavily, lowering himself into his chair. This puts me in a difficult position. The Richardsons are threatening to file a complaint with the Real Estate Commission. On what grounds? I exercised the termination clause in our agreement, which is my right when there's a fundamental breakdown in the agent-client relationship. They're claiming you became hostile and unprofessional. Ellie felt a surge of anger but kept her voice level. That's simply not true. I remained professional throughout our interaction. I have 30 years of spotless client relationships to back that up. 30 years, Robert repeated, his tone softening slightly. That's impressive, Eleanor, and your record here has been excellent. But the luxury market is changing. Clients have different expectations now. Different expectations about what their agent looks like, you mean? Robert didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned forward, clasping his hands on the desk. Look, I understand your frustration. But we need to salvage this situation. I want you to call the Richardsons, apologize for any misunderstanding, and see if we can reinstate the listing. Ellie took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm settle over her. For decades, she had accommodated, compromised, adapted to an industry that increasingly valued image over substance. She had watched her beloved island transform from a community of locals and respectful transplants into a playground for the wealthy, where longtime residents were priced out of their own neighborhoods and cultural knowledge was treated as quaint rather than essential. I won't be doing that, Robert, she said quietly. The Richardsons made their position clear, and I've made mine. There's no misunderstanding to resolve. Then I don't see how we can move forward. This firm can't afford to alienate clients. At that level. I understand. Which is why I've decided it's time for me to make a change. The words came easily, as if some part of her had been preparing for this moment for years. I'll be submitting my resignation, effective immediately. Robert looked genuinely surprised. Eleanor, that's an extreme reaction. We can work through this. It's not just about the Richardsons. It's about recognizing that what I value in this business is no longer aligned with the direction this firm is taking. It's time for me to return to my roots. Your roots? What does that mean? Ellie stood, smoothing her blue dress with steady hands. It means I'll be re-establishing Kapua properties. It's time to build something that reflects my values again. In this market? With the major firms dominating luxury sales? That's financial suicide. Perhaps. But I'd rather fail on my own terms than succeed on someone else's. As she walked out of Robert's office, Ellie felt lighter than she had in years, as if she'd set down a burden she hadn't fully acknowledged was crushing her. Diane was waiting by her desk, concern written across her face. That bad? Actually, it was clarifying, Ellie replied, beginning to gather her personal items into a cardboard box. I've resigned. You what? Diane's voice rose enough that several agents looked up from their desks. Ellie, think about this. One bad client doesn't mean it's not about one bad client. It's about realizing I've been trying to fit into a system that was never designed for someone like me. I'm going to restart Kapua Properties. Diane stared at her, shocked into momentary silence. But, how? The overhead alone would be, I've been saving for years. I have enough to lease a small office and get started. It won't be easy, but it feels right. Ellie placed the last of her personal items in the box, a family photo, a small potted orchid, the worn copy of Real Estate Law in Hawaii that had been her constant companion for 3 decades. At least take some time to think about it, Diane pleaded. Don't make a life-changing decision when you're upset. I'm not upset, Ellie realized with surprise. I'm the clearest I've been in years. As she carried her box toward the door, Jason approached, his expression concerned. Ellie, I just heard what happened. I want you to know I had nothing to do with the Richardsons asking for me. I know that, Jason. Despite everything, she felt no resentment toward him. He was simply benefiting from a system that valued his presence over hers, regardless of their respective expertise. Where will you go? What will you do? Ellie smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes for the first time that day. I'm going to build something new. Something that honors what I know and who I am. The afternoon sun was warm on her face as she loaded the box into her car. For a moment, she sat behind the wheel, not yet starting the engine, and allowed herself to fully experience the mix of emotions washing through her, fear about the financial risk, lingering anger at the Richardsons, but predominantly, a powerful sense of liberation. Her phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Lawrence Chong. Miss Kapua, I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to confirm our meeting tomorrow and let you know that we've been researching properties beyond the Richardson estate. Mr. Chong, I should inform you that I'm no longer with Island Paradise Realty. I've decided to re-establish my own brokerage. There was a pause on the line. I see. And will you still be able to assist us in our property search? Absolutely. If you're comfortable working with a small, independent firm. Miss Kapua, what impressed my family was your knowledge and integrity, not the size of your company. We would be honored to work with you directly. Relief and gratitude washed over her. Thank you. That means more than you know. As she hung up, Ellie realized she had secured her first clients for her new venture, before she even had an office. Perhaps Robert was wrong about her chances in this market. Perhaps there were still buyers who valued substance over flash, knowledge over image. The drive home took her along the coast, past beaches where she had played as a child, now lined with luxury hotels and exclusive residences. So much had changed in her lifetime, yet the mountains still stood watch over the island, the ocean still wrapped around its shores in an eternal embrace. Some things remained constant, no matter how the human landscape transformed. At home, Ellie changed into comfortable clothes and sat on her lanai, watching the sliver of ocean visible between the vacation rentals. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a daily miracle that no developer could package or sell. She needed to call Leilani and explain her decision. Her daughter would worry about the financial implications, about medical school tuition, about her mother starting over at 62. But first, Ellie needed to speak with someone who would understand the deeper motivations behind her choice. Uncle Keone answered on the third ring, his voice weathered by age but still strong at 84. He had been her father's best friend, a respected elder in their community, and someone who had watched over Ellie since her parents' passing a decade ago. Uncle, I need your wisdom, she said after their initial greetings. Then you have come to the right ancient tree, he replied, his humor intact despite the health challenges of recent years. What troubles you, Keiki? She explained everything, the Richardsons, their dismissal, her decision to leave the firm and restart her own business. As always, Uncle Keone listened without interruption, giving her the space to unfold her story completely. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Before speaking, you know the story of your great-grandmother Nalani? The one who refused to sell her land to the sugar plantation? Yes. They offered her money, then threatened her, then tried to trick her by saying all her neighbors had sold. But she knew the land was more than just dirt and trees. It was identity, it was history, it was the foundation for future generations. Ellie had heard this family story many times throughout her childhood, but today it resonated differently. They told her she was foolish, that progress couldn't be stopped, that she was standing in the way of the future, Uncle Keone continued. But she understood something they didn't, that some things, once lost, can never be recovered. I'm not sure how this relates to my situation, Uncle, Ellie admitted. I'm not protecting ancestral lands. I'm just starting a business. Aren't you, though? Aren't you protecting something just as valuable? The right to exist in your own homeland on your own terms? The knowledge of place that can only come from generations of connection? His words struck a chord deep within her. The Richardsons made me feel like I didn't belong in the world of luxury real estate because I don't look or act like them. And what did you do? I walked away. No, Keiki. You didn't just walk away. You chose to create something new, something that honors who you are and what you know. Like Nalani, you refuse to accept that progress must look only one way. That success has only one face. Tears welled in Ellie's eyes, unexpected and cathartic. I'm scared, Uncle. What if I can't make it work? What if I've thrown away security for pride? What is security worth if it requires you to become smaller, to deny your mana? Your great-grandmother was scared too, but she understood that fear is just one voice among many. Listen instead to the voice of your kupuna, your ancestors, who stand behind you, supporting your spine. After they hung up, Ellie sat in the gathering darkness, Uncle Keone's words settling into her heart like seeds finding fertile soil. Perhaps her decision wasn't just about one insulting interaction or one lost commission. Perhaps it was about reclaiming something essential that she had gradually surrendered over years of accommodation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Leilani. Just got out of class. Call when you can. Love you. Taking a deep breath, Ellie dialed her daughter's number, preparing herself for the difficult conversation ahead. How would she explain that she had potentially jeopardized their financial stability because of what some might see as wounded pride? Mom, I've been thinking about you all day. How did the showing go with those Singapore buyers? Leilani's voice was bright with enthusiasm, unaware of the day's dramatic developments. The showing itself went well. The Changs were impressed and interested. But afterward, things took an unexpected turn. Ellie proceeded to explain everything, the Richardson's comments, her decision to terminate the listing, her resignation, and her plan to restart Kapua Properties. When she finished, she braced herself for concern or disappointment. Instead, there was a moment of silence before Leilani spoke, her voice thick with emotion. Mom, I am so incredibly proud of you right now. You're proud? Honey, I just walked away from financial security, from your tuition money, from people who didn't value you. From a system that wanted you to be less than you are. Do you know how many of my classmates talk about their parents compromising their values for money? How many of them are studying medicine because their families pushed them, not because they feel called to it? This is different, Leilani. I have responsibilities to you, to our future. And what kind of future would it be if it was built on you swallowing your dignity? Mom, you've always taught me to stand up for myself, to know my worth, to never let anyone make me feel small. How could I possibly be disappointed that you're living those same values? Tears flowed freely down Ellie's cheeks now. But your tuition is not worth your self-respect. We'll figure it out. I can take out additional loans if needed. Maybe I'll apply for more scholarships. The point is, we'll find a way forward that doesn't require you to diminish yourself. When did you get so wise? Ellie asked, wiping her eyes. I had a pretty amazing teacher, Leilani replied softly. A woman who raised me alone after Dad died, who worked incredibly hard but never complained, who taught me that integrity matters more than appearances. They talked for another hour, making plans, discussing possibilities, supporting each other across the miles that separated them. By the time they hung up, Ellie felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with uncertainty, yes, but also with authenticity and the freedom to fully be herself. As she prepared for bed, Ellie found herself drawn to the wooden box of photographs she had looked through just the day before. She pulled out the image of herself at 30, standing proudly in front of the original Kapua Properties office. The young woman in the photo stared back at her with such hope, such determination, such belief in the future. We're going to try. Again, Ellie whispered to her younger self. And this time, we're not going to lose sight of who we are. The next morning, Ellie woke before her alarm, energized despite the emotional turbulence of the previous day. She dressed with care in a flowing teal dress with subtle Hawaiian prints, professional but distinctly local, exactly the kind of outfit the Richardsons would have considered too ethnic for luxury real estate. Her meeting with the Changs wasn't until 11, which gave her time for another important stop. The small commercial real estate office in central Kihei was just opening when she arrived, the agent clearly surprised to see a client so early. Ellie Kapua. Haven't seen you in ages. What brings you in today? I'm looking for a small office space, Michael. Something professional but not extravagant. Preferably in Kihei or Wailea. Office space? I thought you were with Island Paradise. Now. As of yesterday, I'm re-establishing Kapua Properties. Michael's eyebrows shot up. Bold move in this market. Let me see what I have available. He pulled up listings on his computer, occasionally glancing at Ellie with newfound respect. You know, my parents bought their first home through you. Back when you had your own firm. They still talk about how you found them something they could actually afford when other agents kept pushing them toward more expensive properties. I remember them. The little plantation-style house in North Kihei? That's the one. They were able to pay off the mortgage 5 years ago, partly because you didn't saddle them with more debt than they could handle. That house is the reason. I could go to college. His words warmed her heart, a reminder of why she had gotten into real estate in the first place, not to sell luxury properties to the wealthy, but to help families find homes they loved and could afford, to be part of building a sustainable community. After reviewing several options, Ellie settled on a modest office in a professional building near her home. The space needed some updating, but the bones were good, and the large windows offered natural light and a partial ocean view. Most importantly, the rent was reasonable, and the landlord was willing to offer a month-to-month lease to start. I can have the paperwork ready this afternoon, Michael said as they shook hands. And Ellie? I think this is going to work out better than you expect. There are still plenty of people on this island who remember what you did for them. Her next stop was the beach. Not the manicured stretches fronting luxury resorts, but a small local beach where families gathered on weekends and elderly men still fished in the traditional way. She removed her shoes and walked along the shore, feeling the sand between her toes, listening to the rhythm of the waves. This was her island, her home, despite all the changes and development. The essence of it remained in places like this, in the knowledge carried by elders like Uncle Keone, in the stories passed down through generations of families like hers. By the time she arrived at the coffee shop to meet the Changs, Ellie felt centered and clear. She had prepared information on several properties that might meet their needs, focusing on homes that offered not just luxury amenities but authentic connections to the island's culture and community. Lawrence Chong greeted her warmly, introducing his wife Mainland and their daughter Grace more formally than during yesterday's showing. Ms. Kapua, we were very impressed with your knowledge yesterday, Lawrence began once they were settled with their drinks. Particularly your understanding of how properties relate to their surrounding communities. That's an aspect many agents overlook, Ellie acknowledged. But in Hawaii, particularly on Maui, the relationship between a property and its community context is essential to understanding its true value. Exactly what we were thinking, Mainland nodded. We don't want to be visitors who disrupt the local balance. We want to invest responsibly. Their daughter Grace, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. My parents are considering this property as a part-time residence but also as a legacy investment. We want to understand not just its financial value but its place in the community's future. Ellie felt a surge of hope as she listened to this family articulate values so different from the Richardsons. Here were wealthy investors who nevertheless understood that true luxury included responsibility and respect for local context. Then I believe I can help you, Ellie said, opening her portfolio. I've selected several properties that offer the privacy and amenities you're looking for, but also positive relationships with the surrounding community. As they discussed options, Ellie found herself speaking with a confidence and authenticity she hadn't fully embraced in years. She didn't downplay her local knowledge or cultural insights. Instead, she centered them, explaining how understanding wind patterns, historical land use, and community relationships affected everything from property maintenance to long-term value. This is exactly the perspective we were hoping for, Lawrence said as their meeting concluded. We'd like to arrange viewings of these 3 properties, and we're also interested in learning more about that agricultural parcel you mentioned. Of course. I can arrange that for tomorrow if that works with your schedule. As they stood to leave, Grace Chong lingered behind while her parents stepped outside. Miss Kapua, I want you to know how refreshing it is to work with you. Most of the agents we've encountered in luxury markets are more interested in impressing us than in actually helping us make a responsible investment. Thank you, Grace. That means a great deal to me. My parents don't just want another vacation home. They want to be respectful participants in this community. Your approach aligns perfectly with that goal. After the Changs departed, Ellie remained at the coffee shop, reviewing her notes and planning her next steps. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with financial risks and professional challenges. But for the first time in years, it was also filled with the possibility of building something that truly reflected her values and honored her knowledge. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Lease documents ready whenever you are. Office. Can be yours starting Monday." Ellie smiled, feeling the pieces of her new beginning falling into place. The Richardsons had told her she didn't belong in their world of luxury real estate. What they hadn't understood was that this island, with all its complexity and beauty, had never been theirs to define. It belonged to its history, to its community, and to those who respected both. And in that world, Eleanor Kapua belonged more than most. 3 weeks into her new beginning, Ellie stood in the freshly painted office of Kapua Properties, arranging orchids on the reception desk. The space had transformed remarkably quickly, walls now a warm sand color, koa wood accents throughout, and locally crafted artwork depicting island landscapes adorning the walls. A large map of Maui dominated one wall, hand-marked with notes about different neighborhoods, historical sites, and community resources. The morning sunlight streamed through windows now draped with sheer curtains and ocean blues, casting a peaceful glow across the bamboo flooring. This space felt nothing like the corporate sterility of island paradise realty. It felt like Maui. It felt like home. The bell above the door chimed softly as Diane entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a small paper bag. "Brought you a macadamia nut scone," she said, placing the offerings on the desk. "The place looks amazing, Ellie. I can't believe what you've accomplished in 3 weeks." Ellie accepted the coffee gratefully. "I couldn't have done it without help. Uncle Keone's grandnephew did the painting for free, and Leilani's friend designed the website for half her usual rate." "That's what happens when you've spent decades building real relationships instead of just business connections," Diane observed, settling into one of the comfortable chairs arranged for clients. "How are things going with the Changs?" A smile spread across Ellie's face. "They made an offer on the McKenna property yesterday. Not the Richardson estate, they decided it wasn't right for them, but a beautiful beachfront home with better community integration." "That's wonderful. Your first commission is Kapua Properties too." "0, and it's a good one. 6.5 million, which means enough to cover startup costs and still contribute to Leilani's tuition." Diane's expression grew more serious. "And the Richardsons? Any more fallout from that situation?" Ellie sighed, setting down her coffee cup. "Robert called yesterday. Apparently, they're still threatening to file a complaint with the Real Estate Commission. And they've been telling anyone who will listen that I'm unprofessional and hostile to mainland clients. That's ridiculous. You've never been hostile to anyone in your life." "Fortunately, my reputation speaks for itself. I've received 3 calls this week from former clients who heard I'd reopened my own brokerage. 2 locals looking for family homes and 1 part-time resident who wants to sell his condo." Diane nodded approvingly. "See? The universe has a way of balancing things out. I don't know about the universe, but I do know that treating people with respect for 30 years builds the kind of goodwill that even the Richardsons can't undermine." The office phone rang, and Ellie excused herself to answer it. Diane watched her friend's face transform as she spoke with the caller, first surprise, then thoughtful consideration, and finally a measured smile. "That was interesting," Ellie said after hanging up. "It was Jason from Island Paradise." "Jason? What did he want?" "To let me know that the Richardsons fired him yesterday. Apparently, he wasn't aggressive enough in his marketing approach. They've now gone through 3 agents in 3 weeks." Diane shook her head in disbelief. "They're going to run out of brokerages at this rate." Jason also mentioned that the property has developed something of a reputation in the luxury market. "Buyers are hearing about the Richardsons' behavior and steering clear." "Karma," Diane said with satisfaction. "Pure karma." After Diane left for her shift at Island Paradise, Ellie settled at her desk to review the day's appointments. She had showings scheduled with a local family looking for their first home, a meeting with a community land trust interested in developing affordable housing, and a conference call with Leilani to discuss financial planning. The diversity of clients represented exactly what she had hoped to achieve with the relaunch of Kapua Properties, serving both luxury buyers who respected the island's culture and local families who needed an advocate in an increasingly unaffordable market. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grace Chong. "Parents signed the final paperwork this morning. We're all so grateful for your guidance. Dinner to celebrate when the closing is complete?" Ellie smiled, typing back her acceptance. Working with the Changs had reminded her of what real estate could be at its best, not just transactions, but relationships built on mutual respect and shared values. The morning passed quickly with calls and paperwork. Around noon, Ellie decided to walk to a nearby cafe for lunch, enjoying the warm sunshine and the familiar greetings from local shopkeepers who had known her for decades. She was just finishing her salad when a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she found herself face to face with Victoria Richardson. "Eleanor," Victoria said, her voice tight with barely restrained emotion. "I thought that was you." Ellie maintained her composure, though her heart rate accelerated. "Mrs. Richardson. This is unexpected. May I?" Victoria gestured to the empty chair across from Ellie. After a moment's hesitation, Ellie nodded. "Please." Victoria sat, arranging her designer handbag carefully on her lap. She looked thinner than Ellie remembered, with new lines of stress around her eyes despite her impeccable makeup. "I assume you've heard that our property remains unsold," she began without preamble. "I've heard there have been some challenges with the listing." Victoria's laugh held no humor. "Challenges? Yes, that's one way to put it. 3 agents in 3 weeks, and suddenly no one wants to touch a perfectly lovely $8 million beachfront property." Ellie remained silent, waiting for Victoria to continue. "The market is whispering about us. About how difficult we are, how unreasonable." Victoria's perfectly manicured nails tapped a nervous rhythm against her handbag. "Your former colleague Jason suggested that we've developed a reputation. Real estate is a small community on Maui," Ellie offered neutrally. "People talk. People blame." Victoria's voice hardened. "Marcus is convinced you've poisoned the market against us, spread rumors about how we treated you." "I've done no such thing, Mrs. Richardson. I've been focused on establishing my new brokerage, not discussing former clients." Victoria studied her face for a moment, perhaps searching for deception. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders dropping slightly. "I believe you, actually. Which means our reputation is entirely of our own making." The admission seemed to cost her, but she continued. "We've been on the island for 8 years, and suddenly we're pariahs in the luxury market. No agents want to work with us, no serious buyers are interested in the property, and our investment opportunity in Singapore is slipping away because we can't liquidate this asset." Ellie felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication but also a surprising thread of sympathy. The Richardsons had treated her terribly, but their current predicament brought her no joy. "I'm sorry to hear you're facing difficulties," she said simply. Victoria's expression shifted from defensive to something more vulnerable. "Marcus would be furious if he knew I was here. His pride won't let him acknowledge that we may have been wrong in our approach." Ellie remained silent, sensing there was more to come. "The Changs went with you, didn't they? After we lost you as our agent?" "The Changs became my clients, yes. But they didn't buy our property. They found something that better suited their needs and values." Victoria nodded slowly. "You know, when we first bought on Maui, we were enchanted by the island's beauty, its culture, its unique spirit. Somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing it as a living community and started seeing it as just an investment, a status symbol." Her candor surprised Ellie, who had never expected this kind of self-reflection from Victoria Richardson. "The property isn't selling because no one wants to work with us," Victoria continued. "But it's more than that. Marcus won't admit it, but I think we've lost touch with what made this place special to begin with. We've been treating it like it could be anywhere, Malibu, the Hamptons, St. Tropez, instead of respecting what makes it uniquely Maui." Ellie found herself nodding. "That happens sometimes. People fall in love with a place, but then try to reshape it into something familiar rather than embracing what made it special in the first place." Victoria met her eyes directly. "We need to sell this property, Eleanor. The Singapore opportunity won't wait forever, and frankly, I think it's time for us to leave Maui. We've clearly lost our connection to it. I'm sure you'll find an agent eventually. The property itself is beautiful. We don't want eventually. We need someone who understands the island, who has connections in the luxury market, who can highlight what makes this property uniquely Hawaiian rather than just another luxury estate." The implication hung in the air between them. "Mrs. Richardson," Ellie said carefully, "if you're suggesting what I think you are, I'm not sure it would be appropriate given our history. I'm asking you to reconsider representing our property," Victoria confirmed, her voice steady. "You were right about the Changs. They were interested in the cultural and community aspects that we dismissed. If we'd listened to you instead of letting our biases guide us, we might have sold the property weeks ago." The irony was almost too much. The woman who had told Ellie she didn't belong in luxury real estate was now asking for her help precisely because of the qualities she had previously dismissed. "This is a difficult request, considering the things you and Mr. Richardson said about my suitability to represent luxury properties." Victoria had the grace to look genuinely embarrassed. "We were wrong. Plainly, obviously wrong. Your knowledge of the island, your understanding of buyers like the Changs, that's exactly what we need now." Ellie took a moment to consider the request. The commission would be substantial, enough to secure Kapua Properties' future and fully fund Leilani's education. But there were principles at stake that money couldn't address. If, and this is a significant if, I were to consider representing your property again, there would need to be clear understandings about respect, about approach, and about who makes decisions regarding how the property is presented. Victoria nodded quickly. Of course. We would defer to your expertise completely. And there would need to be a formal apology from both you and Mr. Richardson for the discriminatory comments about my age, my background, and my appearance. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. Marcus would never. Then I'm afraid I can't help you, Ellie said simply, reaching for her purse. I wish you the best of luck finding representation. Wait. Victoria's hand shot out, not quite touching Ellie's arm but hovering in a gesture of entreaty. Please. I'll talk to him. He's struggling right now. The Singapore deal is incredibly important, and he feels like everything is slipping away. I understand that this is a difficult situation for you both. But I can't compromise on basic respect, Mrs. Richardson. Not anymore. Victoria was silent for a long moment, conflict evident on her face. Finally, she nodded. I'll speak with Marcus tonight. May I call you tomorrow? You have my number, Ellie confirmed, standing to leave. And Mrs. Richardson? Whatever happens with your property, I hope you find your way back to what originally made you love Maui. It's worth rediscovering. Back at her office, Ellie found herself pacing, turning the conversation over in her mind. The practical businesswoman in her saw the obvious benefits of taking on the Richardson listing, financial security for her fledgling brokerage, vindication in the eyes of those who had doubted her decision to strike out on her own, proof that her expertise was indeed valuable in the luxury market. But the part of her that had walked away from Island Paradise Realty, that had refused to accept being diminished or dismissed, that part hesitated. Would representing the Richardsons now, even on her own terms, somehow invalidate the stand she had taken? Or would it represent the ultimate victory, them coming to her, acknowledging her value, accepting her conditions? She was still contemplating these questions when Uncle Keone arrived for their weekly lunch, his movements slower these days but his eyes as sharp as ever. You look troubled, Keiki, he observed as they settled on the office's small lanai with the lunch she had prepared. The new business bringing challenges already? Ellie explained the encounter with Victoria Richardson, laying out both the opportunity and her reservations. Uncle Keone listened thoughtfully, breaking off pieces of bread to feed the birds that gathered hopefully at the lanai's edge. When she finished, he was quiet for so long that Ellie wondered if he might have dozed off, as he sometimes did these days. You know the story of Pele and Kamapue? He finally asked. The volcano goddess and the pig god? Their great battle? He nodded. They were enemies, fierce and proud. Their conflict shaped the very land we live on. But do you remember how their story ends? Ellie searched her memory for the details of the ancient legend. They reached a truce, divided the island between them. Wet lands for him, dry lands for her. Yes. Not friendship, not love, but a respectful recognition of each other's power and place. Uncle Keone's weathered hands gestured toward the mountains visible in the distance. Our ancestors understood that sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy, but transforming the relationship into something that respects both parties' mana, their inherent dignity and power. You think I should take the listing? I think you should consider what true victory looks like in this situation. Is it watching the Richardsons fail? Or is it them acknowledging your value and accepting your terms? Which outcome changes the story for others who might come after you? His words resonated with something deep within her, the understanding that her actions now would set precedents, would become part of the narrative about who belonged in Maui's evolving real estate landscape. But what if they're not sincere? What if they're just desperate? Uncle Keone's smile held centuries of wisdom. Then that is useful knowledge too, isn't it? And you will be approaching from a position of strength, not supplication. The terms will be yours to set. After he left, Ellie called Leilani, wanting her daughter's perspective before making any decision. They came to you? Leilani's disbelief was evident even across the thousands of miles separating them. After everything they said? Victoria did, yes. She's going to speak with Marcus tonight. And you're actually considering it? Mom, these people told you that you didn't belong in their world. They humiliated you. They did, Ellie acknowledged. And now they're coming to me because they need exactly what they dismissed, my knowledge, my connections, my understanding of this place. Leilani was quiet for a moment. You know, in my ethics class last semester, we talked about the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is about making the other person suffer. Justice is about restoring proper balance and dignity to all parties. And which would this be? I think it depends on how you approach it. If you take the listing just to prove something to them, or because you enjoy seeing them desperate, that's revenge. But if you do it on terms that restore your dignity, and actually help them understand what they did wrong, that might be justice. When did you get so wise? Ellie asked, echoing her question from weeks earlier. Like I said before, I had a good teacher. That evening, Ellie sat on her lanai watching the sunset, turning the situation over in her mind. The Richardson property was beautiful, with legitimate value that went beyond its luxury amenities. With the right approach, one that honored the property's place in the community and its Hawaiian context, it could be an asset to the right buyer. And perhaps there was a certain poetic justice in her being the one to sell it, on her terms, with her values front and center. Her phone rang at 8:30. Marcus Richardson's name appeared on the screen. Eleanor, he began when she answered, his voice lacking its usual authoritative edge. Victoria spoke with you today. She did. She says you might consider representing our property again, under certain conditions. That's correct. He was silent for a moment, clearly struggling. We would be grateful for your expertise at this point. The property has been on the market for nearly 2 months with no serious offers. I understand that's frustrating, Mr. Richardson. But before we discuss business, there's something that needs to be addressed. Another pause, longer this time. Victoria mentioned that you wanted an apology. Yes. For the statements you both made about my suitability to represent luxury properties based on my age, background, and appearance. I never explicitly said, Mr. Richardson, Ellie interrupted gently. We both know what was implied, if not stated outright. If you're not prepared to acknowledge that, then I don't see how we can work together effectively. The silence stretched between them, taut with unspoken tensions. Finally, Marcus sighed, a sound of genuine defeat. You're right. What I said, was discriminatory and wrong. I allowed my preconceptions about what a luxury real estate agent should look like to override the evidence of your actual expertise and accomplishments. I apologize for that, sincerely. The words were clearly difficult for him, but they seemed genuine. Ellie felt something loosen in her chest, not forgiveness exactly, but a shifting of the weight she had carried since that confrontation. Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I appreciate your honesty. Does this mean you'll consider representing the property? I'll consider it, yes. But as I mentioned to Victoria, there would need to be clear understandings about approach and decision-making. I would need complete authority over how the property is presented, marketed, and shown. Of course, he agreed quickly. Whatever you think best. And the commission rate would be 7% rather than the standard 6%, given the property's history and the additional challenges involved in marketing it now. She expected resistance to this point, but Marcus simply said, that's acceptable. Then I suggest we meet tomorrow at your property to discuss specifics. I'll bring a new listing agreement that reflects these terms. Thank you, Eleanor. We appreciate this more than you know. After they hung up, Ellie sat with the phone in her hand, contemplating the turn events had taken. 3 weeks ago, the Richardsons had told her she didn't belong in their world. Now they were accepting her terms, acknowledging her expertise, and agreeing to pay a premium for her services. It wasn't about revenge, she realized. It was about transformation, of relationships, of perceptions, of what was possible on this island she loved so deeply. The Richardsons might be leaving Maui, but perhaps they would leave with a better understanding of its true value, of the importance of respecting the place and people who made it special. And she would remain, building something that honored both her heritage and her expertise, creating a model of what real estate could be when it centered knowledge, integrity, and authentic connection to place. As the last light faded from the sky, Ellie felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight, she could rest in the knowledge that she had stood her ground, held firm to her values, and emerged stronger than before. The community would indeed never be the same. And neither would she. The morning of the Richardson estate open house dawned with perfect Hawaiian weather, gentle trade winds, clear blue skies, and temperatures hovering in the mid-70s. Ellie arrived 2 hours early, directing the small team she had assembled with quiet authority. Fresh tropical flowers filled custom-made koa wood vases, their vibrant colors complementing rather than competing with the ocean views. Local musicians set up on the lanai, their traditional instruments ready to provide subtle background music that would transport visitors into an authentic Hawaiian experience rather than generic luxury ambience. The information packets need to go on the kiawe wood table, not the glass one, Ellie instructed her new assistant, Kai, a recent graduate from the University of Hawaii's business program. And make sure each one has the historical context insert on top. Kai nodded, rearranging the materials. The caterers just arrived. They're setting up the local cuisine stations in the kitchen and lanai. Perfect. And did the cultural practitioners confirm? Yes, Auntie Mahina will be here at 11 to discuss the traditional land divisions, and Uncle Keone's grandson is bringing the historical maps he restored. In the 6 weeks since taking over the Richardson listing, Ellie had completely reimagined how to present the property. Gone were the generic luxury marketing materials that could have represented any high-end home in any affluent coastal area. Instead, she had created an experience that centered the property's unique place in Hawaii, its relationship to traditional land divisions, its views of historically significant landmarks, its position within the community's past and present. Marcus Richardson entered through the front door, his expression a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. He had kept his distance during the preparation phase, honoring their agreement to give Ellie complete control over the marketing approach. "Eleanor," he greeted her, surveying the transformation with wide eyes. "This is not what I expected." "Good morning, Mr. Richardson," she replied calmly. "The final preparations are nearly complete. Would you like a preview of how we'll be presenting your property today?" He nodded, following her through the space with growing amazement. Where previous agents had emphasized only luxury features, the imported marble, the designer fixtures, the top-of-the-line appliances, Ellie had created a narrative that wove these elements into a deeper story about place and connection. The native hardwood accents throughout the house echoed the traditional Hawaiian value of living in harmony with natural resources, she explained, gesturing toward the koa wood details. "We've highlighted how the home's design respects the land's natural contours rather than imposing upon them." In the kitchen, local chefs prepared small tastings of Hawaiian fusion cuisine, using ingredients sourced from island farms. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Pacific gleamed in shades of turquoise and azure, while the musicians on the lanai began a soft melody that seemed to rise from the landscape itself. "Over here," Ellie continued, leading him to a previously unused alcove, "we've created a small historical display. These maps show how this area has evolved over generations, from traditional Hawaiian land divisions through the plantation era to today's development. Potential buyers will understand that they're not just purchasing luxury square footage, they're becoming stewards of a place with deep cultural significance." Marcus stopped before the display, studying the carefully restored maps and historical photographs. "I've owned this property for 8 years, he said quietly, "and I never knew any of this history." Ellie nodded, unsurprised. Most agents don't emphasize these aspects because they assume luxury buyers only care about amenities and exclusivity. But my experience suggests that today's most discerning clients want authenticity and meaning along with their high-end features. They want to understand the soul of a place, not just its specifications. As they completed the tour, Marcus shook his head in wonder. "It's like seeing the property for the first time. You've highlighted elements I never even noticed." "That's the advantage of perspective, Mr. Richardson. Sometimes it takes someone with different experiences to reveal what's been there all along." The subtle reminder of their previous conflict hung briefly in the air between them, but Marcus nodded in acknowledgement rather than defensiveness. "You were right," he admitted. "About the approach, about what makes this property special. I wish I'd listened sooner." Before Ellie could respond, Kai approached with phone in hand. "The first guests have arrived at the security gate. Shall I have them sent up?" "Yes, and please ensure Auntie Mahina is ready to begin her cultural introduction in 15 minutes. As Marcus moved to leave, they had agreed he wouldn't be present during the open house. He paused beside Ellie. "Whatever happens today, I want you to know I was wrong about you. You belong in this world more than most of us who just pass through it." The acknowledgement, offered without prompting, touched something deep within Ellie. "Thank you, Mr. Richardson. That means more than you might realize." Over the next 3 hours, a carefully curated group of qualified buyers, wealthy but thoughtful, interested in more than just another trophy property, moved through the home. Ellie had personally selected each invitee based on their reputation for community engagement and cultural sensitivity, drawing on connections she'd built over 30 years. Unlike typical luxury open houses with their atmosphere of exclusive privilege, this event felt like a celebration of connection, to the land, to history, to community. Potential buyers engaged with cultural practitioners, asked thoughtful questions about the property's relationship to its surroundings, and responded enthusiastically to the authentic Hawaiian elements Ellie had incorporated. By mid-afternoon, when the last guests had departed, Ellie sat on the lanai overlooking the ocean, making notes about each potential buyer's interests and concerns. The event had exceeded her expectations, with 3 attendees expressing serious interest in making offers. Her phone rang, Leilani calling from California. "Mom, how did it go?" Her daughter's voice carried equal parts excitement and curiosity. Better than I could have hoped, Ellie replied, smiling as she gazed out at the waves breaking gently against the shore below. We'll likely have multiple offers by tomorrow. That's amazing. And the Richardsons? How did they react to your approach? Marcus was here this morning before we opened. He seemed genuinely impressed, and a bit humbled, I think. He actually admitted I was right about centering the Hawaiian context. Wow, Leilani breathed. That's quite an evolution from the man who said you didn't belong in luxury real estate. People can surprise you when given the opportunity, Ellie observed. Sometimes what looks like prejudice is really just fear of the unfamiliar, fear of losing control, fear of change. Still, it can't have been easy to work with them after what they said. It wasn't, initially. But I realized something important along the way. If I had refused their listing out of pride or hurt, I would have missed the opportunity to demonstrate a different way of doing things, not just to them, but to everyone watching this sale. What do you mean? Ellie considered how to articulate the understanding that had been growing within her over these past weeks. By taking on this listing on my terms, I'm not just selling one property. I'm modeling an approach to luxury real estate that honors Hawaiian culture and community instead of erasing it. I'm showing other agents, other sellers, other buyers that there's a different way forward, one that can be both profitable and respectful. You're changing the narrative, Leilani said thoughtfully. Exactly. And sometimes, that's more powerful than any individual victory or vindication. As they continued their conversation, Ellie described the details of the open house, the local artists whose work she had featured, the traditional land acknowledgement that had opened the event, the way she had highlighted sustainable features that honored Hawaiian values of resource stewardship. I wish I could have seen it, Leilani said wistfully. It sounds like you created something truly special. We documented everything, Ellie assured her. Kai took photos and videos throughout. I'll send them to you tonight. After they hung up, Ellie remained on the lanai, watching as the afternoon light softened toward evening. The musicians had long since packed up their instruments, the caterers had cleaned and departed, but something of the day's energy lingered in the space, a sense of possibility, of paths redrawn, of stories retold. With new emphasis. Her phone buzzed with a text from one of the day's attendees, a tech executive from San Francisco. Mrs. Kapua, today was extraordinary. We've experienced luxury properties around the world, but never one presented with such depth and authenticity. We'd like to make an offer. Can we meet tomorrow? Before she could respond, another notification appeared, an email from Grace Chong. My parents asked me to express their admiration for your event today. Though we've already purchased, they were deeply impressed by your approach to honoring the property's cultural context. They're recommending you to several friends in Singapore who are considering Hawaiian investments. A warm sense of validation washed over Ellie. This was what success looked like on her terms, not just selling expensive properties, but changing how people engaged with them, helping them understand that true luxury included responsible stewardship and cultural respect. As she gathered her materials to leave, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway from the kitchen, Victoria Richardson, elegant as always in a simple linen dress, her expression uncharacteristically hesitant. Eleanor, she said softly. I hope I'm not interrupting. Marcus told me how extraordinary the open house was, and I wanted to see for myself. We've just finished, Ellie replied, gesturing toward the remnants of the event still visible throughout the space. But you're welcome to look around. Victoria moved through the room slowly, taking in the thoughtful touches, the historical displays, the local artwork, the subtle ways Ellie had highlighted the home's relationship to its Hawaiian context. This is remarkable, she said finally, returning to where Ellie waited on the lanai. You've shown the house in a way we never considered. I've simply emphasized what was already here, Ellie responded. The connection to place, to history, to community. Victoria nodded, her gaze drifting toward the ocean. Marcus told me what he said to you this morning, about belonging here more than we do. He's right, you know. We bought this house because it was exclusive, impressive, a status symbol. You understand it as part of something larger and more meaningful. The admission seemed to cost her, but Victoria continued. I keep thinking about what you said that day at the cafe, about hoping we would find our way back to what originally made us love Maui. The truth is, I'm not sure we ever truly loved Maui itself, just the idea of having a prestigious address here. The candor surprised Ellie. It's never too late to develop a deeper connection to place. Perhaps not, but our path seems to be leading elsewhere now. The Singapore opportunity is calling, and this chapter is closing. Victoria turned to face Ellie directly. I understand you may have multiple offers already? Several serious inquiries, yes. I expect formal offers within the next day or two. Then it appears your approach has succeeded where 3 previous agents failed. Victoria's smile held a touch of irony. I suppose there's a lesson in that. There usually is, if we're willing to see it. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, 2 women who had moved from conflict to something approaching mutual respect, if not quite friendship. There's something I've been wanting to ask you, Victoria said finally. Something I've wondered since that first showing with the Changs. Why do you stay? With your knowledge and connections, you could sell real estate anywhere, California, New York, places where the commissions would be even higher. Why remain on an island that's changing in ways that must sometimes break your heart? The question caught Ellie off guard with its perception and sincerity. She considered her answer carefully. Because someone needs to bear witness, she said finally. Someone needs to remember what was here before, to know the stories, to understand what's at stake. Someone needs to help guide the change in ways that preserve what matters most. She gestured toward the coastline stretching beyond the property's boundaries. I was born on this island. My ancestors are buried here. Their knowledge and their values live in me. If people like me leave, who will remain to speak for this place? Who will help newcomers understand that they're not just buying property but becoming part of a continuing story? Victoria nodded slowly. I never thought of it that way. As a responsibility rather than just a career choice. It's both. Ellie acknowledged. But the responsibility came first. The career simply became the means to fulfill it. As Victoria prepared to leave, she extended her hand. Thank you, Eleanor. Not just for what you're doing with our property, but for what you've taught us, however reluctant we might have been to learn. Ellie accepted the handshake, feeling the circle of their relationship complete itself. Safe travels on your new adventure, Mrs. Richardson. May you find what you're looking for. 2 days later, Ellie sat at her desk in the Kapua Properties office, reviewing the 4 formal offers that had come in for the Richardson estate. All were strong, at or above asking price, but she was looking beyond the numbers, evaluating each potential buyer's understanding of and commitment to responsible ownership. Diane burst through the door, waving a local business magazine. Have you seen this? You're the cover story. Ellie accepted the magazine with surprise. There on the cover was a photo of her standing on the lanai of the Richardson estate, ocean stretching behind her, her expression confident and serene. The headline read, The New Luxury, How Eleanor Kapua is Redefining High-End Real Estate in Hawaii. When did they take this? She wondered aloud, trying to recall any media presence at the open house. Read it. Diane urged, practically bouncing with excitement. The article chronicled Ellie's career, from her early days selling modest homes to local families through the launching of her first independent brokerage, the challenges of the 2008 recession, and her recent decision to leave Island Paradise Realty and restart Kapua Properties. It highlighted her innovative approach to the Richardson listing, describing it as a revolutionary model that centers Hawaiian cultural context and community relationships in luxury real estate. Most surprising was a quote from Robert Keller. Her former broker, Eleanor Kapua, has always been ahead of her time. While the rest of us were selling features and amenities, she was building relationships and honoring place. The market is finally catching up to her vision. Robert said that? Ellie couldn't hide her astonishment. Apparently so, Diane grinned. Your phone's about to start ringing off the hook. As if on cue, the office line lit up. Over the next 2 hours, Ellie fielded calls from other luxury property owners interested in her approach, from media outlets requesting interviews, and from community organizations seeking her participation in panels about sustainable development. By late afternoon, when she finally had a moment to breathe, Uncle Keone arrived, moving slowly with his cane but beaming with pride. The community is buzzing about my famous niece, he teased, settling carefully into a chair. They say you're changing how luxury properties are bought and sold on the island. I'm just trying to honor what you and others have taught me, Ellie replied, pouring him a cup of tea. About respecting place, about maintaining connection, about remembering what matters. And in doing so, you've created something new. He gestured toward the magazine on her desk. A way forward that neither clings rigidly to the past nor abandons it completely. I don't know if it will last, she admitted. The market changes quickly. What seems revolutionary today might be forgotten tomorrow. Uncle Keone's weathered hand covered hers. Some changes go deeper than fashion or trend. You've reminded people, even wealthy outsiders like the Richardsons, that there's value in understanding and honoring the spirit of a place. That kind of change ripples outward in ways we can't always predict. As they sipped their tea, Ellie's cell phone rang. Marcus Richardson. Eleanor, he began when she answered. I've just reviewed the offers you sent over. They're all excellent. Yes, I think any of the 4 would be appropriate buyers. Each brings different strengths to the table. Victoria and I have discussed it, and we'd like to accept the Murakami offer, even though it's not the highest. Their letter about their intentions for the property was, well, it was moving. Their commitment to continuing the community access to the shoreline trail and their interest in local conservation efforts align with how you've repositioned the property. Ellie smiled, pleasantly surprised by their choice. The Murakamis were a Japanese-American family with deep roots in Hawaii, successful technology entrepreneurs who had expressed genuine interest in being responsible stewards of the land. I think that's an excellent decision, Mr. Richardson. The Murakamis will bring the right energy to the property. Your approach made this possible, he acknowledged. If we'd continued marketing it as just another luxury estate, we might still be waiting for offers. After they discussed the details of moving forward with the acceptance, Marcus hesitated. There's one more thing, Eleanor. A personal matter. Yes? Victoria and I have been doing some soul-searching these past weeks, watching how you've honored this place we've owned but never truly understood. Before we leave Maui, we'd like to make a contribution to a local organization that supports Hawaiian cultural preservation or affordable housing for local families. Would you be willing to advise us on where such a gift might do the most good? The request, so unexpected and sincere, brought tears to Ellie's eyes. I would be honored to help with that, Mr. Richardson. There are several organizations doing important work to maintain Hawaiian cultural practices and address housing challenges for local families. Thank you. It feels like the right way to say goodbye to an island that has been our home, however imperfectly we may have understood it. After they hung up, Ellie shared the conversation with Uncle Keone, whose eyes twinkled with satisfaction. You see? Transformation, not just transaction. You've changed not only how they sell their property, but how they understand their relationship to this place. It feels like coming full circle, Ellie admitted. From being told I didn't belong in their world to helping them make a meaningful departure from ours. Uncle Keone nodded. That is the way of deep change, not through confrontation alone, but through offering a new vision compelling enough to shift how people see. As the afternoon light softened into evening, Ellie's phone rang once more, Leilani calling from California. Mom, I just saw the magazine article online. You're famous? Ellie laughed. Hardly famous. Just doing things a bit differently. The comments section is blowing up with people talking about how important your approach is, how it could transform luxury development throughout Hawaii. There are real estate agents from other islands asking if you offer training or mentorship. That's unexpected. The implications began to dawn on Ellie. Perhaps what she had done with the Richardson property could become a model, a template for others to follow, a way of engaging with luxury real estate that honored rather than erased Hawaiian context. The best part, Leilani continued excitedly, is that several comments are from local families you helped years ago. They're sharing stories about how you found them affordable homes when other agents pushed them toward properties beyond their means, how you explained Hawaiian land concepts that other agents ignored, how you always emphasized responsibility to place and community. Tears welled in Ellie's eyes. Those are the relationships that matter most to me. I know, Mom. And now everyone else knows too. You've created something important, a way of doing business that doesn't require compromising your values or identity. After they hung up, Ellie sat on the small lanai outside her office, watching as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. From this vantage point, she could see both the luxury resorts of Wailea and the more modest neighborhoods of Kihei, the ancient mountains and the ever-changing sea. 6 weeks ago, she had stood in the Richardson estate, told she didn't belong in the world of luxury real estate because of who she was. Today, she had not only sold that same property on her own terms but had begun to transform what luxury meant in the context of Hawaiian real estate. The journey had been painful at times, challenging her to confront both external prejudice and internal doubt. But standing firm in her values, refusing to be diminished or dismissed, had opened a path not just for herself but potentially for others, local agents who brought deep knowledge of place, cultural practitioners whose expertise enhanced property values, communities whose histories and needs deserved consideration in development decisions. As darkness fell, Ellie gathered her things and locked up the office, her heart full with the day's events. Walking to her car, she passed a young Hawaiian woman showing a local family a modest home across the street, speaking with enthusiasm about the neighborhood's history and character. Ellie smiled in recognition, not of the agent personally, but of what she represented, the next generation continuing the work of honoring place, of building community, of finding balance between change and preservation. Perhaps that young woman would face her own versions of the Richardsons someday, her own moments of being told she didn't belong in spaces she had every right to claim. But perhaps, too, she would find it slightly easier because of the path Ellie and others had walked before her, each generation making the way a little clearer, a little more just, a little more aligned with the deeper values of the island they all called home. As she drove along the familiar coastal road toward her condo, Ellie felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The Richardsons would soon leave Maui, their property passing to new owners who would, she hoped, bring more understanding and respect to their stewardship. But she would remain, continuing the work that had always been more calling than career, helping people find not just houses but homes, not just investments but connections, not just property but place. They had told her she didn't belong. And in response, she had not just reclaimed her space but expanded it, creating room for a new vision of what belonging could mean, for herself, for her community, and for an island navigating the complex currents of tradition and change. The community would indeed never be the same. And that, Ellie realized as she watched the stars begin to appear above the darkening ocean, was exactly as it should be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.